Thou great first cause, least understood, who all my sense confined, to know but thee that thou art good, and that myself am blind. If I am right, thy grace impart still in the right to stay. I am wrong. 0 Teach my heart to FTND that better way. It is the solemn, silent midnight hour. The clock upon the shelf has just told the requiem of another dead day, the last of myriads that have gone before, the first of myriads yet to be. A moment since, and a newborn hour by in its strange, eventful, fitful life, and we are he by a few more springing into being, shall find us where? Perhaps rejoicing at a safe deliverance from sin and its consequences, perhaps mourning over wasted strength and blasted hopes on the other side of time. To be or not to be, after life's fitful fever is o'er, is a most tremendous question to be asked, a mighty problem to be solved, and yet from the thickest ranks of the people who based human immortality on the remarkable manifestations made by invisible agents, today goes forth the startling cry. 6. CC all men are not IOBBL, untold hosts of human beings are doomed to a SLP that shall never more know waking to a death to last forever. This cry has startled thousands, it has carried icy despair to hearts once filled with hope. It has so plunged many a soul into a misery too fearful for the damned to suffer, and all the more surely and bitterly, coming as idodos from the lips of those who gained EIR daily food, be it dispensing the bread or immortal life, causes agony all the more wretched because uttered by those who, in their heart of faux hearts, now BB1 TBR, for, as God is my judge, I do not be-only have that one of these non-immortality people believe though dreadful sophistry. They tell us that spiritualism let them owe their conclusions. It may be so, but if such is to be the result of spiritualism, in God's name, let us wash our hands of the whole thing and fall back on common principles. But I don't believe these people know what they are talking about. Amic learning hath made them mad, for they tell us in onio breath that spiritualism leads to everlasting life, and also to eternal death. Both propositions cannot be true. Man must be immortal, because he is man. That settles it. A tree can not be a tree and not a tree at the same time. Either we survive death as spirits, or we do not. If we do, it is by reason of our human nature, which, all men possessing in common Quara.nt's a life beyond to all of us. We are not, it results so from an infinite mistake or oversight on his part who doth allow things well, and for, at death we shall all be eternally blotted out of being. Horrible io. It is to write a few thoughts on this and a cognate question or two, that I now sit to my table to fulfill what I regard as bound dei dudio. Anq it is night when I cage in my task. 60 minutes or more, and this hour will have recorded its joyous and its fear of all history upon the everlasting scroll of time. A momentum a new boat of circumstances, another crowd of the 7. Tinies will be here to cumber free, or to circumvolve us all, not one shall escape. Circumstances and destinies to be encountered and borne by us poor, weak, and erring human beings, and we all, if the last philosophical dogma be true, may fold our hands in mute despair, as we are isle down TBI, wind into a gulp, whence we may escape with being, and wherein also we may be forever drowned. Another day is here. Through it we are to carry on this round of human strife, but one who shall describe the anguish, the bloody sweat, those soul-wrung tears of the GRET multitude, in the terrible coming conflict, foredoomed to this new day? Round me at this moment strange memories are clustering, the flitting ghosts of departed days, dead joys, blighted hopes, and hours filled with agony, and yet I may not look for a life beyond the grave, nor may millions such as I one weird memories of strangled pleasures are here, and with them, trooping shadows of the /light have been, but for cruel circumstance. Yet the eternal God placed us here to bitterly mock Mo, and all who are human, with shadowy hopes of an hereafter. Place the cup of immortality to our lips, we joyfully lift it, are about to taste, when he suddenly dashes it to earth, and all the arching heavens ring with sardonic laughter. Who believes this? Do you? Above me stretches the vast blue sky, with all its teeming millions of things whereof we know not anything. Beneath Mo lies the dust and cinder, the ruins and the ashes of all the dead ages. About me on all sides, is a boundless realm of mysteries, mysteries in little things as well as in great, and within me I feel a mightier mystery, STLL soul, the deathless, aspiring soul, struggling almost vainly for light, more light, on what environs it, and to express that which it already knows. I feel that soul to be immortal. What is for me is for all. We all want to live in the great beyond. This want is no proof, certainly, that we shall so live in itself considered, but this want 8. Is only the outward expression or an inward prescience. This prescience is the God within us, it is the mind. God made man in his own image, not physically but mentally, all there is or God is mind. Not the body but the mind makes up though man. Mind is deathless, and man being mind also, it follows, that while God lives we shall, and when he id blotted out we shall no longer want to be. And until he shall give signs or old age or decay, I shall gly /ye him true, and all non-immortalists mistaken. At this solemn hour all is hushed and still about me, save the tick, tick or the timepiece, and the strange, wild throbbing of my heart. A heart pulsing for a something it hath not yet achieved, but which it longs and yearns to, a heart, too, which few none perhaps, God knows anything about, for hearts are not easily KNWD, and few but him can sound their deeps of bitterness and woe, count their pain throbs, or plumb their wells or agony. And now, urged on by an irresistible impulse, originating in and emanating from the soul itself, the writer of this is about to put pen to paper to give briefly a few of the results of his experiences of two sorts of spiritualism. Everybody knows that PB Randolph is a sangmike, a sort of compound of a variety of bloods. It is so, nor is be sorry. With the great disadvantage of an unpopular complexion, and a very meager education to back it, in the early days of what has since become an extended movement, I embraced spiritualism, rapidly passed through several stages of mediumship, and finally settled down as a trance speaker. This step I now regard with feelings widely different from those entertained on this subject some years ago. The evidence presented me was sufficient to carry complete conviction of the actuality of spiritual intercourse. I belie /ed in it then, I believe in it still, yet, white once believing that all spirits were good, 'tis not so now by any means, for beyond all question there are 9. More than one kind of spirits in communication with the world today. At least there n 2, the one being good n and d few, shading off photo the indifferent n and d numerous, and finally ending in the decidedly bad, whose lumbers I believe to be very great, whose power I know to be onormu 1. From amongst this latter class men can obtain endorsers to and for any iniquity under heaven, for instance, that slavery is right, p. Omis quid a divine thing, adultery not objectionable, bastardy a fair thing, God a perfect myth, Jesus Christ a nobody, and worse than all the rest that some men are not immortal, and children under 7 years, if they die, do so body, soul, and spirit. Such spirits prompt man to evil deeds, lechery, abortions, and revenge, not by direct teaching always, but by infusion of their spheres, their auras, the exuvia of hell itself, by which is meant the sum of all wickedness. They roam often as angels of light, exactly as do their earthly counterparts. Why, how they? The sun shines on the evil and the good here, Liadmi for can visit, molest, and torment good ones, why not then see /il beings from the other side do the same? They unquestionably do, but while they assume the disguise of friendliness, in reality they are poison as a pestilence, worse than a cobra, because they fang our very souls. Of course these post-mortal worthies deny God, Christ, the Bible, and all else that's really good and true. Where persons get fully en rapport with this class of beings, they are thenceforth on the highway to misery most exquisite. It is the sort of spirits who paint false visions on the mental tablets of mediums, and spread reports about progress, spiritual life, localities, and which so often prove unsatisfactory, and which are in most cases as untrue as that 1 and 1 make 10. Beings of this class I call vampires, Sidho Ulabel, or the magic globe, for their whole aim and end is to seize upon and obsess or possess some unprayerful, they cannot upon any other, magnetic person, mainly of ardent temperament, generally those who are rather ignorant, and 2. 10. The first result thereafter is that Miss A falls in love with an honest W.M.N's husband, and does her prettiest to get him all to herself, or Mr. W. finds that his wife, who has put up with hard fare ever since she was wheedled into marrying him, and who has borne bis children in agony inexpressible say Mr. W. finds her growing too old and distasteful for his holiness, and so deserts her almost, if not quite deserts her, and, here 2 or more children, and goes roaming about the world, displaying his eloquence and flippantly preaching about doing to others as he'd be done by, at so much a lecture. Those en rapport with the class of invisibles alluded to, act as if they were, as indeed they are, possessed, if not by the devil, at least by a power which approximates thereto in wickedness. The victims are perhaps not so much to blame for the first results of the baleful obsession, but having once discovered, or been clearly shown its character, and thereafter continuing the fearful friendship, there is not only guilt attached to them, but a penalty has inevitably to be paid, whose exact ions will indeed prove terrible, for the fiends will sport with them, perhaps as God's corrective agents, until at last, throwing off the mask, they appear in that end clear true light, and defy the miserable one's most strenuous efforts to escape. They shall ho plunged into the depths, nor come thence, till the uttermost farthing is paid. To an observant person, the line between orderly and holy spiritual intercourse, and that which alone is responsible for all the evil that has attended the march of the general movement, is both distinct and clear. For example, a sweet and calm, a holy and serene peace attends upon the one, and the direct opposite results from the other. All the adulteries and fornications, affinity business and home desertions that have occurred within the ranks of believers since the movement began, is as directly traceable to the influence of the anti-Christian, God-kneeing, obsessing spirits, as that the fall of the last brick in a row is traceable to the toppling over of its neighbor. Per con. 11. All the good that has grown up out of the Generq movement is just as directly traceable to the Christian wing thereof. There's no mistake about this matter. Individuals under the general influence of the Mauvaise movement are pretty considerably elevated in our own esteem. They are like unto balloons inflated, and need pricking awfully, in order to get them once more on curva firma, and not unfrequently they get it habitually. Persons thus possessed, set up business and thrive by serving as oracles, with more or less success, for neophytes who seek for light from the world of souls. A recent writer thus speaks of those here alluded to, they the obsessed pro one whose great things yet perform very little. They exaggerate all things, and mistake highfalutin for genuine eloquence, and ignorant of the road to truth, they pretend to be able to show it unto others. Their appearance, says this writer, appears to suppose a certain degree of moral delinquency, manifesting itself particularly in sensuality, by which I understand a greater regard for the things of this life, the personal appetites, and rather than only deep randomativeness. He proceeds to say, next, there appears a weakening of the bodily organization, particularly the nervous system, producing derangement in the whole internal life. Again, we often find a subjection of the nervous system, and with this, all the voluntary bodily functions, especially langue_age, to the will of the demon speaking through them, but always so there reappears, at moments, the consciousness of their own individuality. This state is quite parallel with the trance, iridasis, or being in those spirit, and speaking with tongues, that is, the effect produced in the trance, by the Spirit of God, in the other case, produced by the unholy element of darkness. The person appears with his own human consciousness suppressed, and a controlling foreign influence on his nervous life. But as there are alternating seasons in which the hostile power is ascend. 12. And in which it retreats, so, after a paroxysm, the human self shows out in lucid inter-als. We discover, also, in them an enhanced faculty of foreseeing, a kind of somnambulic clairvoyance, similar to that he met with in the history of animal magnetism. It is thus that their contradictory language is to be explained. At one time, they manifest a deep insight into truth, at another, our popular notions are mixed up in their words, so that their conversation has the fearfully vivid actor of the warring and confused talk of madmen, who not unfrequently give utterance to striking thoughts, but so connect them with other elements, that the splendor of the thought is only a more melancholy testimony of the greatness of the derangement in the seed of life, whence it issued. Again, some are agitated throughout the whole body, others, in some of their members, others, again, are entirely quiet. Sometimes there are pleasing harmonies, dances, and according voices, and sometimes the reverse. Again, the body either appears taller or larger, or is borne aloft through the air, or is affected by the opposite of these. Good spirits communicate with good men, of course, but the wicked spirits insolently invade things sacred, and introduce irregularities, make one spirit appear for another. Wicked spirits for good ones vaunt glorious speeches, and arrogate to themselves unreal powers. Debarred by their own iniquity from pure spirits, they attract evil ones by affinity, and impel them to iniquity. I think this charge is rather too strong. Why, it will be seen in the latter pages of this pamphlet. It is, I think, high time that the line between the good and evil was clearly drawn. Would I had means to publish my whole thoughts on this matter. But I have not, and so shall do the best I can in these few pages. I beg leave to quote at this point the opinion of the Reverend T. L. Harris, London Sermon, p. 27 et sec. The mesmerist habitually imparts the finest essences of his 13. Own fra.mo. He depletes himself of the blood of the nerves. He literally gives himself to others. It may be the highest of all acts, as when a good man, moved by an inspired sentiment of duty and of love, pours in the life-giving efflux from the choicest spirit breakers in his own heart and brain. It may be merely a professional act, exercised in profound ignorance, thoughtlessly, and as a ready means of livelihood. And it may be a most infernal act, the man makes use of the electric streams as telegraphic lines, for the purpose of flashing in enslaving or destroying purposes, upon the moral will, which he seeks to make a slave. It cannot long remain, morally, a neutral act. The mesmerizer soon penetrates to occult secrets, which I dare not here name. In the majority of instances he discovers himself not alone to give out OD life force, but, in turn, to reset it to receive it from unseen fountains of supply. He is led to the threshold of a conscious mediumship, and the slightest falling off upon his part from in science, and the sense of moral obligation, cuts him off from the upper sources, which are divine. He then receives from lower sources, which may at first be mainly from attendant spirit.s of a dubious morality, but which at last are from those fixed in the wickedness of hell. Unless, therefore, the mesmerist continually becomes more self-abnegating, more humanly just and noble, more angelic, the very practice of his art, whatever be the respectability of the assumed appearance, causes him to become internally a huge receiving reservoir of the magnetism of the lost spirits, invisible to sight, are his mesmerists from the lower world, who, in the proportion with which he fills patients and subjects with himself, surcharge him with themselves. A fearful consideration. 11. Now, the odyllic emanations which surround every human being, include the organism in a powerful preservative and resistant sphere. This is perpetually replenished from the divino. 14. Life, which flows into the human heart, and is distributed through the lungs, through the air vehicles, through the pores of the whole frame. When a wicked person approaches with the intent to deceive, to possess, or to inflict any species, either of physical or moral wrong or ruin, this dense odyllic sphere is a protection, WHI_CB, especially concentrating itself around the brain and heart, acts as a resisting shield. The mesmerist who exercises his station in the Lord seeking only to impart a pure influence for ends of purity, a good influence for ends of good, is superintended during the mesmeric process, by his or her guardian angel. The stream becomes ninefold natural from the human operator, heavenly from the angelic superintendent. The odyllic sphere, encompassing the patient, is opened, and the instacaming essences rapidly appro priated to the building TLP of the impaired organs of the frame. After which the odyllic sphere is closed, as before. Mesmerism and demoniacal session. Otherwise it is with the mercenary, otherwise with the operator intent on self-seeking or enslaving ends. He is presided over, not by the angel, but demon. Through there Combined will force the odyllic sphere is torn apart, or riven by electric bolt. Point 8, a burst by concussion, after which, vast bodies of deleterious magnetism are lodged within the system. Physical health may seem for a time to be restored, but the odyllic sphere once conquered, most frightful consequences may ensue. Consequi PCE. First, subjugation by the familiar spirit. We are all followed by familiar spirits. Their perpetual effort is to control thought and feeling, to make us their passive agents. Multitudes of spiritual media in Europe and America, though I admit a considerable exceptional class, are ruled by spirits. There are prowling bodies of marauders upon the unseen border land between the natural and spiritual worlds. When the 15. odyllic sphere is broken, the divinely fashioned barrier which surrounds the body is no longer closed against their access. In the multitude of cases, the unguarded person is expo. 5 OD to mesmeric influences from these robbers who infest the desert of the inner death. They may be divided into two classes: first, the vampire, and second, the possessor, one seeking to rob the body of its most essential life, the other endeavoring to pollute the inner tabernacle of the soul itself. I use the term vampire to denote a class of wandering spirits, exceedingly corporeal and mortal, who maintain a hold on nature by paeans of odyllic bodies, encompassing the true spirit form. As these odyllic bodies continually waste away, they endeavor to reconstruct them by appropriating to themselves all the more impalpable, ethereal essences of the living human body. They literally, when once fastened upon a system open to them, through the rupture of the odyllic sphere, cat out the animal spirits, causing mania, hysteria, insanity, decline, or suicide. I see. Simultaneously with this process, the IC possessor, whose warfare is against the spirit, rather than its tabernacle, makes, if possible, a lodgment in the body of the mind and will. When this lodgment has been obtained, the unfortunate subject rapidly becomes a medium in the full sense, using the word however, as denoting, not the mediatorial state of order, but of disorder. The manifestation of that mediumship will now be such as shall be decided, first, by the qualities of the enslaved organization, second, by the directions which the possessing fiend shall receive from his or her infernal rulers. For instance, if their plans can best be carried out by making the man or woman disbelieve that there are such beings as spirits, or any life beyond nature, the mind becomes an epitome of organized Sagicoism. If it is their cue to heap contempt upon religion in the house of its friends, they make their subject reveal a malignant, mock piety. 16. If crocodile personal charms exist, they develop the serpent-tongued, unscrupulous deceiver. If, however, though here there be restrained, they succeed in getting full possess on body and soul, they have found and LTL an instrument through which to carry out sorcery on the broadest scale upon the earth's inhabitants. If the imagination is at their control, they can mirror PO and its lensic organs, such mock pictures of paradise as might deceive the cry elect, personating upon that magic surface any human form, and human face. If the sensations are TMBJCCT, then, as by a more insidious process of serpent charming, delights are produced, for deceptive ends, enrapturing as underscore those said to follow the use of hashish, or pastiles of opium. If they obtain mastery of the organs of speech, they can talk, preach, argue, pray, do all in fine with the voice, and more than its rightful owner can. If the whole line of the anyone whose system is open to their electrical projections, they are then in a condition to produce the vibratory concussion, known as spirit rappings. If, from internals to externals the whole body is thoroughly at their command, they can eliminate from it the various chemical constituents in their higher potencies, and through the absorption of its particles, reproduce objective spirit hence as they are styled, that is, condensed odyllic and magnetic substances, that like bubbles in those shape of organs, may be seen by the natural eye, and made entities to touch. Having thus the various paraphernalia, they can swing mediums through the air, and induce motion upon material substance, all of which would be disbelieved were there not now many thousands of unimpeachable witnesses to the phenomena. Archimedes only asked for a point on which to rest the lever, declaring that then he could move the world. Mesa 1 Arism, in the hands of ignorance or presumption, or self-love, or greed of gain, or any illicit desire, becomes the block, and affords the point of lodgment for the archimedal engine, pressed into action by the brawny shoulder of the oar. 17. Gani Titan of the Pit. It is to mesmerism, conducted chiefly as a means of gain, or an idle pastime in the first instance, that almost all the disorderly spiritual mediumship, almost all of the lower world spiritualism of the 19th century may be distinctly traced. We have to deal, in Christendom now, not with Satan bound within the confines of the invisible world, but with Satan, through the rupturing of the odyllic spheres of the human race, let loose for a season. The rupturing of the odyllic spheres, encompassing the human person, is attended, in the second place, with the corruption of the nervous fluids, which breed infinitesimal larvae, to become parasites, not merely upon, but in, and through the entire congeries of organs, making up the form. These taint the atmosphere which surrounds two corporeal body, until the man carries with him, in first principles, the apocalyptic plagues. The person thus made, in soul and body, a demoniacal agent, becomes poisonganized. The breath imparts it, it darts. Through the eyes, it impregnates garments. Whether avowedly media or not, they communicate a slow, saturating, eating ire, which, imperceptible to natural vision, impregnates and silently destroy the odyllic spheres of old and young. To sit At a seance with persons in this condition, is to inhale the very virus with which they are reinfected. It may produce no immediate results. Nevertheless, if there is any peculiar taint in soul or body through which it can wind its way into life Sita Clel, unless arrested by a counteracting divine power, it prepares the new subject, if not for demoniacal possession, at least for demoniacal persecutions. The seance becomes, whenever out of place, out of order, out of utility, the devil's batu, and the unconscious medium the decoy, to bring human creatures within the reach of the deadly marksman of Antichrist. Those persons who become, unwittingly, or otherwise, the one objects of the malign influence of which I write, generally reject Jesus Christ, try Bible, God, and all the venerated things of 3. 18. The moral world. These are ignored and cast away in contempt and scorn, and the poor dupes of delusion forget that in the very things they cast aside, there is not so much excitement, nor passionalism, pantheism, none of the inanities, insanities or follies, which abundantly characterize the army wherein they are enlisted. This sort of thing calls itself spiritual, and so it is in one sense that of being promoted, and presided over by invisible beings, but in the nobler, higher, purer sense of that term, it is no more spiritual than brass is pure and solid gold. Elated beyond measure with the notion that because they are oftentimes in communication with invisible worlds, and that they are marching in the van of a grand reformatory army, which progressal, esl, a man twists rope, backwards, the dupes soon lose all self-control, and gradually become immersed in a morass of morbid sentimentality and distorted philanthropism. They rapidly get sick, socially, morally, physically sick, nervous, and irritable. They are going to reform the world instanter. They get astride this hobby, they mount this promising steed. They give a loose rein, clap spurs to his sides, start out roar heaven, and gallop as straight as a string to the devil I nor will. They get back on the highway of common sense, which opens on the turnpike leading unto the port of peace, until they get singed, scorched, badly, very. Whosoever cultivates normal inspiration, by normal aspiration, is sure to come out safely in the end, and those who will take counsel of Suez have waded through the dreadful swamps, been recipients of the baptism of sorrow, and purged by the bath of blood, washed clean by their own salt tears, may escape, and land safely on the healthful shores of this great spiritual river. The man or woman who is attracted to spiritualism ought never for an instant be thrown off their guard by spirits, but above all should never part with consciousness, as ere long they may part with conscience, through the paralysis or the will, whose ever does so, must inevitably lose lst. Dash, dot comma dot comma dot. Dot. 19. Self-control. 2d. Carefulness, and 3d. A proper sense of humana life on earth, and its countless obligations. All men should seek heaven wide awake, and this is plainly God's command, else we should not have been endowed, as happily we are, with normal aspirations, for which there must be a normal inspiration, healthful food. If this be not so, then Jehovah has made more than one mistake. To resign the will into any other than God's hands, is to have no great central idea of human duty, human usefulness, life, purpose, or destiny, and no man, without these personal essentials, can amount to much. He is only half a man, and hardly that, for without a great pivotal idea even of his own excellence, for it is far from being a silly notion that the sense of greatness makes us great, he can never even approximate true manhood, unless he has a belief, a personal creed, a confidence in a strong arm to hold him up, when weary, a central perception and convictign, some great purpose to execute, some thought to popularize for the nations and the ages, some great end and aim in life. Unless he has this, and has it to keep and to hold ever and always before his mind si, he counts as a very small atom in the full measure of humanity, and lacks that inestimable thing called cha.ra.cter, not in the vulgar meaning of the term, as signifying good or bad, but character in the Emersonian sense, as conveying the idea of wholeness, fullness, power. This priceless jewel, this sign manual of the living God upon the human scroll, this certificate that his work was well done, and cared for when finished, this signet of manhood cannot be had for the asking. It must be worked for, and paid for. This tower of strength must be upbuilded by the brawny arm, the heroic resolve, and unremitting vigilance and exertion, else no man, no woman ca never be greatly useful. And now it is the characteristic of some of these weird intelligences, one whom some of us believe to be who'll inspire me, to rob us of the very elements which go to constitute the central crown of manhood Marakfer, because they, by destroying the will which is inevitably the ease where one yields wholly to their magnetic fascination, are the subject a mere tool, a spiritual skipjack, and foolhardy automaton. Remember, I am writing of evil spirits. Now a medium who is a mere machine, cutting all sorts of intellectual flip-flaps, spurred on from behind by obscene ghosts of obscene wretches, out on a lark from obscene pandemoniums, can by no possibility, while thus influenced, nor for some considerable period of time afterward regain perfect health. Just as the reformed drunkard suffers from the alcoholic shock to his physical and moral constitution. And so it is with the obsessed medium of the class indicated, and they outnumber all others, probably 10 to 1, they have not, cannot have, personal dignity or force, no matter what the sex, education, age, or circumstances. To be endowed with character, and thereby be rendered useful, the elements of power within their own souls must be gathered up and concentrated, not diffused and dispersed to the four winds of heaven, as they mainly are. Such persons, those with nothing but mediumship to back and sustain them, invariably lack balance. They may, and do, talk glibly, and there is the Indian chief called it, very much talky, although at first it startles and surprises, generally amounts to nothing but a flux of words altogether nothing else than ta-dottleki. People hearing such for the first time, are apt to imagine it all very fine with listening, yet if asked their opinion 2 days thereafter, will respond, yes, I recollect the speech, it was yes tolerable, in fact very good, but what it was all about, upon my soul I don't know, therefore can't tell. They have either utterly forgotten, or else it comes up as a half-remembered dream, a misty vagueness with ne'er a solid point. 'Tis like Shakespeare's tale told by an idiot, full of soem and fury, ignifying nothing. 21. Tli.s fact is thing to be a notable feat upe in employment, 130 that normal speakers, as they should be, are being greatly preferred to trance ones of any order or pretensions, and 2 will act as a purge to clear the field of persons who lay all their deficiencies of common sense at the door of the invisibles, be Tli good or bad impostors who haven't brains enough to serve as andate of N for the devil. But in reference to those actually influenced by the obsessing power, I may JNSTLY state that the results noted and above, do not always spring from either LA.ck of talent, 1 I act, grace or education, as constituents of the medium's makeup, for in these things many of them lural LG abound, but it does spring from the fact that during their blind slavery to an unseen mastery, they have been sapped, sucked dry by vampires, of all the elements aforementioned, hence the lack or loss of weight of character, a thing which this class above all others should cultivate most, and preserve. In all reason, character springs from bulk of soul, and it does seem to me that the class of spirits I now denounce suck away the very fluid 11 stands qf the soul itself. I have spoken of the soul as a thing of bulk. It is so, and however this notion may displease my readers, I am sure that they also recognize this truth, for people continually speak of fat souls, lean souls, half souls, whole souls, great and little tucked up souls, a successful guess at truth. Let me illustrate this idea. A very clear, truthful, and familiar example may be found in the well-known fact that one man will execute a tune upon a violin or flute, he will read the music at sight, and perform every note in its proper time and place, all in Sri CT 11. Cordano with the rules of art. Presently the piece is finished, the listeners clap their hands, stamp their feet and cry bravo I well done L. In a few minutes thereafter, along comes a little pale, thin man, whose features are haggard, whose eyes are dull, and who takes up the instrument which the other has just laid down. He elevates it to its prop. 22. ER position, glances rapidly over the instrument, and then the music sheets before him. Now look at his eye, note his cheek, one no longer sunken and haggard, but at the sound of the first sweet tone the one flashes live fire, the other is flushed with the tints of genius. This man plays every note, as did the other, precisely as the written SCOLL dictated, but heavens, what a difference he makes the dead instrument fairly speak, in tones supremely human. Every sound goes right to your heart, the spirit pants beneath the magic spell of a nameless charm, and you hold your breath in all lest you lose one single drop of the delicious melody. Now the difference between the 2 players is simply a difference or character in the men, a difference both or soul and its expression. Again, let 2 persons recite a poem Hood's Bridge of Sighs, for instance, or that magnificent embodiment of poesy, Over the River. Let one of these persons be a ordinary schoolgirl of 14, you admire her performance, but now let a great soul of the same age and culture, a girl like Susie Clure of Boston, recite either of these poems, and you listen, not to the poem at all, for the poem has become a living, actual drama, enacting before your very eyes. You see the dark arch, and the black rolling river, with its inky tide right before you, and you belie the victim as she plunges over the parapet. You hear the unearthly shriek as the bubbling waters close over her emaciated form, and your very soul agonizes in unison with Susie's gentle, but powerful spirit, and for the one more unfortunate re of breath, rashly importunate gone to her death. And when the last cadences from the lips of the peerless child fall on your ear, and you return to yourself again, it seems that you had been journeying afar off, and been a spectator of an actual tragedy, instead of merely listening to the recitation of 1. I. 23. A little pathetic poem. The difference between the 2 children is simply one of IOUL, character, and this is the precise and OLFLY difference between men and women, and rationally accounts for the infinite superiority, in point, power, force, cogency, coherency, eloquence and pathos of the same disembodied intelligence, when speaking throng one medium, over the self-same exhibition when in control of another, with all other things being equal, a less amount of soul. When a person, no matter f. which SEI: or oka.t the age, becomes the medium of apocryphal spirits, the unpraying sort, whose pretensions are backed by high-flown talk and sonorous names, the leave-taking between that medium and common sense, is a performance that rapidly takes place, and the old friends seldom meet again. Thenceforward, in their public plays at least. Their talk is like a stream which L11 with rapid course from rocks to roses. They leap from politics to pans, and skip from Charlemagne to Mises. Beginning with the laws which keep the radiant planets in air courses, and ending with some precept deep boat escame neighing eels and shoeing horses. Or, to quote from what is called my recantatio J.1. Speech. He talks of systems, suns and worlds, and interplanetary spaces. Then Pelion upon Asa hurls in speech about the human races. Lie leads you through a vasty dot in sweet discourse on primal cu 111 es, explains who 'tis that ll holds the helm, and prats of nature twixt the pauses. Through spatial halls he roams scot-free, and azure domes and universe. The gods, he knows them all, and he was wee you acquainted with their nurses. He speeds it down the mighty past, of Brahma's egg he had of you, a fortnight spent Skander G8, and 30 days Timbuktu where all the gods and lit. Le Gadia, reviewed he on a desert wild, found all philosophers are not as, except himself, he draws it mild. 5 trillion leagues to him are not, a century scarcely worth a thought. To Orion Fti in Hatfamimate, comes back, add 1L1 TM8 your coot is in it. M. For he, Cleovend FOTV Gok, wood, iron, tone and alalater, some Maoidix, PAIOFL, Tauropods then leaves Kahi fast UD tumbling faster. Booed for the mountains of the moon, he's off sea there a low sky rocket, but big one su way he mitel gun wheelana hama fiu high pecket, kami back, DL Claire thine is dark, and underscore comma. He heard the dog bark, asserts the sacred fire was and LLLLTCHED, and there with Brulu MS egg was hate ahead. W he saw the chickens on the sand, Norweed half west of Hindusi. 11, J.I. leagues and an inch from Kafilraland, saw Krishna, V1 Shnug, Brahmirat daughters, and Shiva, BLM on the waters. Met Thor and Wad of cold Norway, there and 20 million god LSA perhapa there is a door. And more od old lunia cluaic shore. But I've no time to fete them here, for I've followed out a health 11 L beer T will cure dyspepsia, hiata he, liver, NIVEFO 11 ND the source of Nilur river. The pyramids I knew the man designed them and drew up the plan I since Plato he BALWL no James Day. No, not Ian Mr. Hatch. And some other, 6 or 7, explorers of earth, bell, and heaven, who he found th devil is do joke, who've sailed o'er hell and smelt the LLLLOM, I we dug up old Adam's bones TC and GT count his ribs, and heard the groan of Cyclope BNTIMNSTB off, I fear RVE caught the WMR piffled cough, for L met some Indians on my comma. Goodbye, I'll call another day. I cheerfully grant that there are exceptions, which, of course, prove the rule. There is a class of trance speakers, happily nearly played out, and rapidly giving place to wakeful preachers of common sense and, who ascend the platform in a very abnormal and dress-ical phone, to listen to whom for 5 minutes would convince a stranger that they slept on roses, breakfasted on rainbow ulit.s, dined on Worcester's last, topped off with Web St. P, nectar and ambrosia, supped upon de tifadoundalis, and hob nol bed with tle muses for the past 5 years. Many of this class are beautiful females, who although they cannot always please the STLID and aged, yet a 1WAYS succeed in moving the rising generation D. Very much inclined. The most of men are too worldly yet. And not good enough, TC, be either doctored or detrained by such good-looking young women. Grave thoughts are best expressed by GRAE and aged lips. When a female with charms heightened BJ her condition of trance, attempts to teach a promiscuous audience, a great number of her hearers are very apt to forget what she is talking about, and think of something else not quite adapted to the growth of soul. Sorry for it, but 'tis true nevertheless. From such we have too much word painting, too great effort to please, astonish, and captivate, too much attempt at oratory and display, too few ideas, and altogether too much talky-talky-ill. Trance speaking is abnormal, therefore, as a general thing, unhealthy to both speaker and hearer. This opinion is reasonable, and might be fortified strongly, were it necessary. I have seen one exception only to this general rule, and that exception is in the case of Mrs. Conant of Boston, a woman of extraordinary powers and capacities, and beyond all question one of the greatest, because the most useful of mediums. This lady is the mouthpiece of immortality, and seems to have been elect by the very heavens to convey the sense of an hereafter to the longing multitudes of earth. She is beyond all doubt the exponent of the better class of spirits, and is protected by them, to the end that through her matchless mediumship, the fact of a post-mortem existence may be conveyed to scores of thousands. She is the medium of a principle, and not merely of individuals on the other side of time. There are those, who in the trance state, will inform the wondering souls who listen, exactly what time it took to build the world, and precisely the number of elements it contains. They pronounce Jesus a capital good sort of personage, fair to middling but nothing extra. I0, blind teachers, tell us how to follow him. That, air far better than the arid stuff ye feed us with. Through the normal, and Chrysean speakers, true spiritualism thunders forth its edicts against the wrong, with a power felt from sea to sea, and in a voice louder, deeper, and more potent than ever issued from the Vatican, and taught by such 2 and monitors, it is a good lesson. To gain. But when the interests or this mysterious and mighty movement are cared for by self-elected EOLJSTS, who, with Lep Moaha indeed BPK 4th DEANH, Moadins, AEAA, Rocks Iodfril, Iod talk familiarly of roaring low AAA, MS. It's of 12 years due of pappy dogs. Then, if charity dwells with us, we pity the sorrows of that poor young man, and kindly desire to carry him out from the rostrum, and carefully gather him to his fathers. Spiritualism. Bass made many a man make an ass of himself, and set up for a philosopher with nothing but brass for a capital. Men or women are totally unfit for teachers unless their teachings have an absolutely moral end, and themselves live square up to the mark, and so help me heaven I don't believe that more than 2 in 10 of the spirits who control trance mediums are fit company for the inmates of a brothel, much less for those of God's true church. The Persians say that when a woman meddles with politics, it is time to put our trust in God, and I say that when an addle-headed monomaniac, a loud-mouthed fanatic, urged on by invisible scoffers of God and all things good and true, attempts to enlighten us concerning what lies beyond the range of a healthy normal intellect, then it is time for us to stuff cotton in our ears, and go home quietly. When I set pen to paper, the purpose was to tell just exactly what my convictions of spiritualism were, convictions based upon years of experience. I have thus done so, and shall continue to do so, because I believe good will come of it, believing as I certainly do, that while fanatics will decry the common sense of the better class or spirit way, believers will sustain me. All my life long, I have had to face the music, and, God being my helper, expect to till I die. Spiritualism is 27. Of 2 kinds. Here I'll speak of the evil sort and its mediums, further on, I shall treat briefly of the good. The facts of mediumship are now too thoroughly demonstrated to need defense, but with reference to it, it may be asked, cui bono? To which I reply as follows. Spiritual mediumship quickens the venous, arterial, and nervous life and flow, to an abnormal degree. Well and constantly followed, it is very, very unhealthy. Spiritualism has caused many a person to make shipwreck of life, for the reason that when medium-hip stepped in, common sense stepped, and very often stays out. Very few among the multitude of mediums enjoy good health. My theory of this fact is this: mediumship seems to depend upon the presence in, and evolution from the persons of its subjects, of a very subtle fluid that which the German von Reichenbach calls human OD. When this OD is electrical or negative, the party becomes a rapper or a fissy. Calmerdum when it is positive or magnetic, the subject is a trance or mental medium of some sort, and of the two, the last be the most dangerous to be trifled with, or if long persisted in. Why? Because the food and drink make 3 blood, blood makes nervous fluid, nervous fluid changes into OD, and this it is that the malign invisibles use. They suck it out of the medium, and in its stead infuse their own immoral sphere or hell OD, and thus it is true, literally, when we affirm that the devil is in a person. It is this aura of the accursed, and nothing else, when they succeed in driving the natural sphere of a person from him or her, and supply its place with their own, these fiends find it easy work to make the victim believe in all sorts of FO11Y as divine truths. Thus charged, the most absurd and unreasonable things assume sweet, desirable, and fair proportions, the most mischievous sophisms are literal truths, and the most pestilent doctrines appear as things divinely beautiful. Once yet a man or woman be filled with this effluence of the evil ghost, and the road to ruin is wide and fair, and appears 28. Decked along its banks with the flowers of paradise. Reason, flashing in upon the soul, may whisper in the ear as the man stands over the yawning gulf, contemplating an ill deed, the base yielding to some fearful, unhallowed temptation, he that moment feels may forever imperil the peace of his soul, yet when the fiend has a good hold, the hell tide pours in a million avenues, the victim's eye closes, his will is utterly drowned out, he yields, he fall. Through sympathy the demon enjoys the feast, and retires when glutted, to laugh ha at the miserable victims, themselves, save only to Jehovah, being perfectly irresponsible. No people in the world deprecate scandal, and profess so great charity, in WFTU, as this OLT of spiritualists. Yet after 25 years of experience with all shades of faith professors, I have seen none, Bobo as a class, are more dogmatic, intolerant, uncharitable, or more eager to cast the first stone at an erring brother, than they. As a class, indeed, they exhibit a one archable penchant for the delicious tidbits of scandal, of which their movement is so very prolific. A more inconsistent people does not exist. As a class, they claim that nearly all good actions are referable, not to the mediums as individuals, but to spirits who use them as proxies, yet, let one of these spirit-ridden unfortunates, in the wild delirium or deep insanity to which they are subject, commit a fault or error of judgment, and forthwith the hue and cry is raised. These unco-righteous Pharisees taboo him or her, and condemn, without a hearing, some poor, insane sinner. This is not like Jesus, who forgave. No, so great is the love for spirits that none is left for erring man, but the wrong is benevolently shifted from the backs or the dear angels from spirit land to the flesh and blood shoulders of some poor devil, whose errors and tergiversations are the result of a morbidity directly traceable to spiritual intercourse of the fearful and dreadful character here indicated. Thank God, a better class are rapidly taking the places of the sort or spiritualists alluded to. My experience and observation, and see myself have to a great extent escaped the malign influence, is to this effect. The legitimate use of this great spiritual raid was to convince us of immortality. This purpose being served, to each individual investigator, take care he should stop, and by a wakeful life, and unsleeping endeavor. And developing the manhood. To keep company with death spirits afterward, is not always a safe or wise proceeding, for the practice of mediumship exhausts the precious fluids I have mentioned, and when thus drained, the victim is especially susceptible to amorous fascination, believes this on E, or you have won an eternal affinity, and thinking self is gratified actually feeds innumerable vampires who laugh at his credulity or hers as the case may be. The person who becomes affected with medium mania, very often neglects to take proper food, air, exercise, and rest, and thus, by not devoting proper time to recuperate, he or she fails, loses the balance will, grows morbidly sensitive, fanatical, sick in body, mind, morals, and 6.nally goes out of the world before half-life is fairly over. In its first degrees, for there are at least a dozen steps, as in the Mola and Maya of the ancients, mediumship promises an immense advantage, and to some extent fulfills its promises, yet I think very often as a bait or lure. For instance, it preternaturally excites the mental organs slowly but surely work I.ng back to the physical seat of the propensities which, being the weakest spot of the human economy, affords the surest point d'appui, whereon the devil plants the infernal lever wherewith to overturn the spirit, and make wrecks of human souls. After the mind becomes impressed, the subject, while really becoming more susceptible to all sorts of educational influences, is very apt to imagine that a million new avenues to wisdom have been suddenly opened, that they are scholars without the drudgery of study, that they are on the high road to the full 30 and complete development of all the intellectual, and many of the physical faculties, and in short, they are on the imperial highway to absolute knowledge. Such persons forget that whatever is acquired without much effort is worth but very little. The old saw has it, that what comes over the devil's back is sure to disappear under his. Exactly so. This is true. Few gamblers die rich. Few mediums, no matter how much knowledge they may obtain by means of their quickened faculties, can ever be wise without a personal striving. God gives us nothing. He sells everything, and wisdom at the heaviest price, and if we gain it, we must pay its price some time or other. In this respect, Dr. Child's philosophy is the true one. Whatever it may be in regard to other things and points, speaking mediumship is steadily followed, dementage to the best interests of its subjects, unfitting them for the busy life and practical exercise of the commonest kind of sense. He first noticeable cults are the rapid growth of Jove of approbation, self-cm, a glib use of words, as beautiful as light, as empty as JMBL and GTLCS, reminding me of a gentleman from Africa, a colored gentleman named Potter, who, because he had the tact to appropriate the brain fruit of others, which he would deliver glibly enough, imagined himself a second Cato, when in fact, his extinct pedantry proved liam a second edition of Wamba, the Whittle, s. Just so the mere fact of being mediums appears to affect one professors of that art. They get stilted, pompous, and grandiose notions of their own importance, sometimes to a degree perfectly awful to contemplate. It is no uncommon thing for them to announce themselves as modern Christs, or near relations to him, after which they proceed to demolish the Bible, blow up David, sneer at Joshua, and whack Moses after the most approved style. Of course 5c there are exceptions, truly humble persons, but this only proves the rule. It may be objected here that the natural character of the medium is the point of attraction to spirits who thus infuse this folly. 31. Into them. I deny the affirmation in toto. As is the man or woman, so will be their spiritual associates. The moral/e and oleoractor of the spirits and rapport, invariably corresponds to and is determined by the intellectual caliber, the moral stature, and spiritual status of the medium. This was, and to a great extent still ours, a capital axiom with many spiritualists. But, when examined in the light, not of too unfolded reason, but of simple common sense, could anything be more ridiculously absurd and puerile? We have seen and heard Harriet Porter of Bridgeport, a woman of unblemished personal reputation, giving forth stuff too foul for the inmates of a brothel, when she has been under spiritual control. Where was the affinity in that case? Scores of thousands of similar proofs of the fallacy of this celebrated dogma abound in community. We read in the biased New Testament that Jesus Christ, the only Son of the ever-living God, was tempted of the devil. I here raise no question concerning the religion of Boston monotheism, but affirming only that Jesus was the model human being, I submit that in view of the fact that demons had access to him, who was purity itself, where was the attraction? And if they, the fiends, drew nigh unto him, how much easier must it be for them to approach us, poor erring mortals, who are not shielded by a panoply of virtues. Christ himself is reported to have been tempted of the devil. In proper person, on a mountain and elsewhere, and I accept the AC code literally. If therefore, the above axiom be true, then TB Lord and Savior was not merely an impostor, but an incarnate fiend beside, for like only seeks and is attracted by like, and it is clear as noonday that the devil sought Jesus. But what man believes Christ to have been, not merely such a character as that would imply, but that he was stained with crime in the least degree? No. I'll who in though mortal agony of though passion hour, could yet weep for his 32 tormentors, and cry, Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. I did not attract the evil spirit by affinity. The fact is simply this: spirits of good have access to NS through the inner consciousness, very rarely availing themselves of other and more external means of approach. All others, from the indifferent to the bad, reach us through our electric, magnetic, nervous, and otic spheres, or aromal envelopes, nor can we prevent their ingress except by prayer and a constant, unwavering reliance on God himself, who alone and only is mighty to save. It is politically true that eternal vigilance is the price of liberty, and it is equally true in relation to the assaults of the tempting demons, whether they be real spirits, or the souls of departed evil men. This conviction is that of my very soul. My own susceptibility to their subtle incursions is not yet entirely overcome. Sometimes they attack me by platoons and squadrons, trip me up and throw me down, whence only God and Christ can raise me up. At this point I will briefly recapitulate my estimate of the atheistic, ultra, radical, pantheistic, whack-mosel sort of spiritualism that I publicly denounced in 1858, and renounced in favor of a better sort, a Christian system, NYD, albeit I have thought I was forever free from its influence, not a day has since passed over my head, that I have not been B11ET, tempted, tried, castigated, tortured by the infernal host, who in this way make reprisals upon me for declaring them in their true light. Dr. Childs, is this all right? I cannot quite think it was. I left the field of spiritualism in which formerly my lot was cast, because on strict examination, I found it led me and all it and adherents into all sorts of errors, both of action, judgment, and philosophy. Experience, bitter as the grave to childhood, proved beyond all question that it was and still is, godless, non-religious, opposed to the Bible, and all ecclesiastical organiza. 83. It is subversive of human dignity and public morals, is destructive of all we hold most dear and cherish most sacredly. It denies immortality to untold thousands. It robs us of faith in Christ without giving us a substitute. It robs us of our refuge of religion, cultivates the intellect at the expense of the heart. It is a masked monster, all brain and no body. It gives us a philosophy, unsound, and at best merely speculative, cold, cheerless, selfish, and far-fetched, which gradually fastens itself about the soul, devours the affections, and makes man a locomotive encyclopedia without a heart. It addresses the intellect only, and as God intended us to feel, as well as think, it proves itself anything but the sine qua non. It is a bewitching thing, so is a rattlesnake. At first the neophyte rejoice in his newfound freedom, as he falsely supposes it to be. He becomes intoxicated with joy for a while, revels in rainbow-tinted dreams of bliss, is led on step by step, deeper and deeper into a mazy labyrinth of unintelligible and profitless mysteries, emerges only to embark his soul's fortunes in an exploring expedition to the land of shadow, is wrecked on the rocks of doubt, clings to a single plank, dreams on, and not until the cold and chilling fogs of mysticism have frozen his very spirit, does he rouse from his slumber, to find himself on a rough, chaotic sea, which to him, is shoreless, vast and dreary as the icy hand of death. He rests upon a single plank, around him roll and roar the black waves of infidelity, above him is a lurid sky, but no God there to save. Its follower has no chart, no pilot to guide him to the land. Reaction begins, repentance does her work. Fortunate is that soul whose reason is not hopelessly ruined, lost, and wrecked. Fortunate is that soul that does not totally ignore God, or who, insane, desperate, alone, heart-wrung, and aweary of the world, does not rush madly to the suicide's grave, and into the awful pre-ence of an insulted God, unanwanted and unannealed, with all its imperfections on its devoted head. But, thanks to our God, at the moment of 34. Deepest misery, high_s handmaiden, religion, steps down from her rosy throne, calls to his trembling soul, be may hear if he will. She enters the bark of safety, reaches the sinner ere the black tide engulfs his last and only hope, conveys him to the shore of truth, sets his feet upon the firm rock of eternal ages, binds up his bleeding wounds, feeds him with the hriya of life, warms him in the tinshine of righteousness, breathes into him the breath of a divine existence. APD numbers him with the sons of God. The will of man is his great prerogative. To all mediums I say, therefore, exert it. I assert your manhood, resist the influence that seeks wholly to subject you to its sway. Beat back the dark and unknown power. I know that many of you, like Macbeth, fall in resolution, and begin to doubt the equivocation of the fiend. That lies like truth, fear not till Burnham wood shall come to Dunsnane, and now a wood comes toward Dunsinane. So with this evil class of spirits and their specious promises, you will be led on, step by step, on, and only stop at ruin. Resist their dreadful magnetism, for your very susceptibility proves you incompetent to deal with it with safety to yourselves. Leave that to stronger wills and holy men. There is only one chance in billions that the unseen power may mean you final good. The chances are that they are demons clad in robes of light. Resist them then, with all your strength, relying on God for perfect salvation, never forgetting that He helps those who help themselves. Rely on Him, and be these juggling fiend. No more believe that palter with us in a double sense, that keep the word of promise to our ear, and break it to our hope. I understand and use the terms devil and demon as sin. Anonymous with the unregenerate souls of departed men and women, I have another hypothesis to offer and suggest presently. But whether this last be a true one or not, certain am I that devils as above defined, do really exist, and that there are millions of such hovering around, ready to lure, lead, or drive us right into the jaws of death, into the mouth of hell. I am as firmly convinced, as that God Himself bas a being. Why? Because it is utterly impossible to reconcile 1/10 part of my experience of spiritualism, and what I have observed, with the notion that the communicating intelligences are O/J, good. I am not unwilling to admit that the proof of human immortality is as firmly set, strong, positive and certain, if the evidence come from an evil man beyond the grave, as it would be coming from the best that ever crossed the misty river, but I am firmly persuaded that vast numbers of those who communicate have plenty of room for improvement. A straight stick must have two ends. No one disputes so plain an axiom. Now let us apply the same principle to the spirits. We have every reason to believe that, starting from a good man on the earth, there is a chain of ascending good men, step after step, up to angels, cherubs, seraphs to the eternal God himself. Now there must be also a descending scale. We see it here on earth, and have just as much reason to believe that the chain of evil beings stretches away in like manner, till it ends in the quintessence of all ill. I do not assert such to be the case, yet to me it is a theme of much thought. The terrible suggestion presents itself. Recently several prominent spiritualists have turned their attention to this possibility. My soul objects in toto to this hypothesis. Reasoned out the contrary, and fortified my spirit against it, yet when I reason in turn upon my reason, I find myself involved in what looks very like a fallacy. If it be such, it is a very calm. 36. Cayenne 1, and consists in the assumption of extraordinary knowledge practically arrogating God's great prerogative, omniscience. But when I come to the point, what do I really know of any of the great or little mysteries which surround us on all sides? Manifestly, very little indeed. What do I know of the scale or order of viewless beings, that perchance people all the regions round about? Still less. How do I know, first, that this earth may not be the rendezvous of countless multi-tudes o.f BB beings of enormous power, and enormous guile, beings differing from, yet in some respects resembling man in intelligence and facility of action? If such beings, principalities, powers, chiefs of the real kingdom, really exist and there are unmistakable indications pointing that way, scriptural and legendary, how do we know but that, being of rarer materials than ourselves, not subject to the law of gravitation, they may be darting hither and thither at will, through the solar system, alighting here, there and yonder, as fancy prompts, and tormenting us, and amusing themselves at our expense, at the same time? To this I objected thus, oh, but God wouldn't permit such things, you know. Now this answer won't do, for God does permit read many things equally curious, equally beyond our comprehension, aj_d equally bad I1, bad in final results they, or it be all for the apparent purpose of subserving some, to us, unknown, unguist at end of his own? The thing is possible. Who can tell us confidently, in face of the scriptural affirmations of the existence of demons, underscore devils and others of that ilk, that there may not be, and have been for millions of ages, myriads of intelligent observers, looking at and upon the populated world's beings who never owned a material body? What I save God's, has ever swept the fields wherein he has exercised his unlimited creative energy. Once such beings exist, and their number exceed human computative power. They may ascend in grades FR and GDI, and the condition parallel to R. 37. F. Own, meant who I one up to the seraphhood to Jehovah's awful self and CMA. Versely, down. Word in. Wickedness and guile, EO black, I. O deep, so ineffably horrible, that the worst moucardle one ever produced, were a sublime seraph in comparison, the whole centering in one archdevil of inconceivable sublimity of badness fairly offsetting God Almighty's superlative excellence. The Buddhistic 12 tales of a demon may not be all fancy. I throw these suggestions out for the good they may do, in provoking thought amongst the people, who have been felicitating themselves that the devil was dead. He may after all, only have been playing another skillful move in tile great game F the universe. My private opinion on the subject I am not going to give just now, because it is not yet fully made up, yet this much can be said, that whereas I once believed that all things were germinally good, I am led to believe that it was a mistake. I believe now that Christ was something more than a mere man, that high three-cat ear was not a mere farce, that there is a stupendous mystery all about us, that a tremendous danger of what nature cannot be said, lies just ahead of us all, an instinct. Intuition the pre-warned soul itself declares, that religion is a reality not a thing of mere sentiment, that regeneration is of far more importance than aught else, and that nothing but the grace of God, at which the philosophers too of the day are laughing perhaps to their eternal sorrow, can save mankind from the awful peril. Scores of thousands of spiritualists are embracing this conviction, and longing for something better than eternal theorizing and intellectual flimflams contain radical jabber and jaw, theory, fudge, and natural law, hocus pocus, and nong tong pa stupid crams not worth a straw, with which they have been surfeited so long. Great opposition is made to an organized spiritual worship, B1ST for part IH and GTNG to worship God, after some devotional form, in union with altars. It is a notorious fact that spiritual meetings now are little else than intellectual tilting grounds, from which we go no better than we went, no nearer God, and while our intellects are active, the devotional element is pale and weak and cold, we hunger for religious food for the spirit of worship. The most of us have passed through, or are passing through the baptism of sorrow, grief, and pain, and now our hearts are beginning to long for the baptism of divine grace and holy fire, without which heaven may loom up before us, but can never be reached. There is such a thing as a change of heart, sudden, miraculous and complete. I believe all this in spite of what material philosophers say, and in opposition to the direct teachings of hundreds of spirits. I shall believe this till I die. Point 1 class of spirits, confirms this belief, but another class, laying claim to great intellectual powers and acquired knowledge, laugh at it, as do their earthly peers. Heed them not, but remember that the best definition of the devil ever yet made is the perfection of intellect without moral principle. Hundreds of people have attempted to organize what they call Christian spiritualism. They failed. Why? Isms have killed them. I prefer the name broad C11UACH to any other, and propose as its form, first, the recognition of God as the Father, Christ as the model, brotherly love as its soul, prayer music and congregational singing, with sermons on human duty, delivered by men who i.e. lives are squared by the golden rule, who shall preach for stated periods, of not less than 3 months nor more than 1 year. They to be paid a sum 50 per CET above their actual expenses, so that something shall be left for a rainy day. This would be productive of far more good than the present system of itineracy. I prefer this for the reason that the best spiritual religion would soon become established in the land, that precious kind which makes a man look daily into his own heart, and inspires him with the desire, the will and power to cleanse it of all that is unseemly in the sight of God. It will speedily supersede that kind of spiritualism which is fair without, but foul within, which leads to atheism, and wabi, and which, upsetting the finer moral sense, seizes bold of its victims and gallops them to perdition at 10 miles an hour. This proposed broad church must be found dead. 0 and the Bible, the Testament, and particularly upon the idea of justice and charity, taking for its platform Christ's Sermon on the Mount. When looking back upon memory's record, around me on the great world, I cannot, to save my soul, I cannot help believing that the Bible is better than all other books, nor can I help paying close attention to what it says of a devil. In the world I recognize progress and decay alike, decay, too, of the beautiful and good. It is not all progress. And it sometimes appears to me that I can distinctly recognize the handicraft of an agent, fearful ia its masterly power, depth of purpose, foresight, scope of vision, and profundity of guile. And it does seem to me, at times, that nothing less than an fallen archangel, or a seraph of the loftiest degree, a rare and mighty being, clothed in the radiant majesty of intellect, and possessing the sublimest force of mind and will, could conceive of such vast schemes of villainy as are being constantly enacted on the broad stage of the world's great theatre, and then successfully carry them out, while perpetually plotting more. This idea is not that of a puling coward, who fears the chances after death, nor is it the offspring of religious fanaticism. It comes not from the boyish medium of days now fled forever, the unwilling actor in the farce of hurrying up the good time coming, but it comes up heavily, solidly, from the soul depths, as a foresight of what perhaps is a stupendous actuality, else is a feral type of some yet more awful thing. The idea comes up when the duties and obligations of manhood are ripening me for the death harvest, and when 40. Regrets for past fall 1 ies are giving lackey to bright hope, so usefulness here below, before Israel shall touch me with his 11 taf, and tell me that God calls, and I hasten to obey. That all the good in T.S world comes by and through the Holy Ghost, a great many men religiously believe, so do I. Lmt that evil is the mere absence or good can very reasonably be disputed. The one is as real and positive as the other one, albeit the sphere of evil seems somewhat circumscribed, as compared with the good. Let us all devoutly thank God that it is so. From this great deduction of my reason, the fact that evil seems to be circumscribed, I draw the son El Chiringa inferini that the conflict of ages will eventually terminate in the triumph of the good, and hence, that all the demons or evil spirits, and their great and mighty chief, if there be such, will one day, when God alone can tell, become repentant, washed clean, and be numbered with the blessed. This is the hope of my soul, this the belief of my heart. There surely must be a fountain whence evil flows, Ellie, whence the terrible catalogue of crimes mthe world. Whence the murders of a Hicks or a Jackalow. Whence the baser arame of ingratitude, that forever casts a stain upon the name of Tui. Whence the fearful meanness characterizing Thepotter tribe. Whence the parricide of a Gibbs. Philosophy, thou art lame and halting. TBY deductions are jamer still t, though /l art merely superficial, evil is deeper than thy shallow well, nor hast thou yet plumbed its deeps, despite all thy pretensions. I. To assert that sin and wrongdoing is merely the result and crude experiment to ascertain the right, won't do. We often sin with our eyes wide open, fully aware of its fearful penalties, yet urged on by an invisible malice as unrelenting as the very grave. Men know the right, and well approve it too. They hate tlleo tongue. And yell the wndg pursue. 41. Once in my career, when for years I had been under the control of a power, strong almost as fate, wicked as sin itself, I was maya to think, say, and do things, against which, the rare moments, when the good in L was in the ascendant, my soul protested, yet in vain. The vile power was as unrelenting as death, as persevering as the seasons. When I would do good, evil, in the shape of a baleful spiritual influence, was present with me for a time and was aberrated, self-destruction attempted, and all the world looked black as night too. Nor should I now be here to warn others, had not infinite wisdom directed my steps to far-off lands, in which, thank him, the lost balance was to a great extent restored. The effects of this original folly, the yielding of the will to an unseen, unknown, unfathomed, invisible influence, are yet, at the end of long years, keenly felt. It was for this fault that J.H. Fowler so bitterly attacked me in the Anti-Slavery Convention of 1860 in Boston, and for this too did the Liberator disgrace at columns. Still, I repine not. God is for me, I care not, then, who all be against me, so long as I feel that I am right. I. To resume. Is ingratitude a mere sentimentalism? Nonsense. A current philosophy lays it down that, not only are there no evil spirits, but that they are all good, and still worse, that all error is the result of ignorance. To all such fully every sensible man cries, Pish! There must be, it sometimes seems to me, an invisible tempter, of fathomless evil, who amuses his leisure by ruining such as be can at one get control of, through the open door of the passions. The movements of good and evil appears to be from centers, not separately, but together. The ability of the mastermind of the evil movement, must, from the nature and extent of its operations, be little short of infinite. He, or it, seems to play with mankind as you or I would play with chess, only that his is a desperate game, with a million moves, besides which he has the eternal God for an antagonist, and all the superior CIT 6. 42. Ends of the universe, with throbbing hearts look on and count the chances of the tremendous play. For T1, then the other effectually offers check, God's party look, and feel anxious, as pawn after pawn, piece after piece is moved. And see I the hosts of Akbar and the denizens of hell hold their breath in silent awe, as their grim monarch cowls over the mighty board. With keen eye, and steady nerve, he plays right on, and when Bis Prime Minister glances, first at him, then at Bis opponent, half in hope, half in fear, the archfiend impatiently tosses his magnificent head, and vocally replies to his viziers unuttered. Thought fear not, I the best part of the game is mine, I beaten him in Eden again in Judea. And I have bad the best of this one all along the dim centuries, and I mean to win it one. This may not be a mere fancy sketch of mine. In any case, the idea is a very suggestive one. Suppose it to be true. What, then, shall be win it in the end? Will be? Can be? Did he speak truly about the game in Eden? Yes. About the last? I fear yes, 2-1, for the first recorded man was seduced by Wuma. And, as Bis sons have been ever since. The first woman was ruined by curiosity, so have her daughters been to this day. The first son was a ricide, and war, murder. Christ I. What evils have MT followed down the march of the centuries, since that day of stupendous reprisals within the gates of Eden, when the world was very young. His skill will prolong the final end indefinitely, unless something be done on our own part to defeat him. Christianity, true and pure, whether prefaced by the titles Harmonia or Spiritual, calls aloud for recruits to strengthen God's party. Jesus Christ will lead the van, we shall be sensitive pawns in the great game, and help gain a speedy victory for our side, taking good care that our side is al.io God al. Mighties. 43. It seems sheer folly for the teachers of the people to proclaim either that evil is undeveloped good, or else that it is a mere surface thing, which attaches itself to a man's accidents, bt never to the man himself. I declare, and common sense sustains me, that evil, so far from progressing one away and leaving snug little heavens behind it, never fails to perpetuate itself. True, today the world has more of knowledge, more of good, trpth, excellence, turtai, honor and honesty than it eve had before. But, per contra, it also has more ra and lt1 quality, murder, villainy, vice of all srts, and a greater quantum of unmitigated evil than it ever had, and in view of these facts I say, evil is positive in itself. It bequeaths its qualities to posterity, and it works in a way truly miraculous, as for instance, when the children of parents, known to be good, eventually turn out to be harlots, rogues, thieves and murderers. Hereditary bias is at fault here. No, evil don't wear out. It must be washed out by the grace of God, and nothing else will keep it out. Graham bread, cold ader, gymnastics, music, literature, art, science, and philosophy, are all very well so far as they go, so is this blessed light on immortality, but not one of these, nor altogether, will overcome evil and keep it overcome. God's grace is the sine qua non. If evil is only a thing of outside, surface, accident, how happens it that souls, remembering that soul alone is the individual, the body being but one of its accidents, how happens it that souls, not bodies, souls of violence, crime, and outrage, frequently produce sons and daughters, who become great and good men and women? In another case, how is it that the children or grandchildren or theirs of the first bear those of crime, and see one above mentioned, split off, half good, half bad? How is it that souls predisposed to crime and violence, are constantly thrust upon the world with penchants, whose origin is buried in mystery, with passions and proclivities towards ill, which rapidly develop into positive acts against the peace of He? 44. World acts which exasperate all patience, causes jails to be and built, and peoples them with objects of pity to anyone, with even half a heart? If evil is so merely surface, why is it still doubtful whether God or his antagonist evil, is the strongest? Why has not the good triumphed over the bad in hum.an? Soul, seeing that the conflict has been waging on that battleground ever since the first man saw the light, a period of time probably exceeding in ages, the number of years usually assigned a human advent? Can a thing of mere surface exert such a tremendous power and keep it up for centuries? Power 2, that incontestably governs the majority of human councils, presides over the nations, implode.ys the most of human talent, rules in the legislative halls, governs our Congress, perpetuates wrong and plays the devil all over the world? Is that merely surface, which rears its awful head over all human institutions, that breaks more human hearts that God himself can mend, that crushes out the sweet life of love itself, and manures the land with human blood, a power that coolly bids the eternal God defiance, vauntingly taunts ID's ministers, and challenges their master to the combat, a power that smiles in sheer derision at all the F-forts of organized opposition? Wherever God erects a house of prayer, the devil always builds a chapel there. And that isn't all dash or he carries the crowd. One is this power merely surface that thus utterly defies all the good in the world, to attempt its subjugation, and which openly boasts of its work of injury to the world, and retardation of civilization? Is that evil merely a surface one which stands on the hilltops of te world, and whenever it beholds one of God's messengers on a flight to earth with healing on its wings, instantly dispatches teeming swarms of pestilent demons to the same locality, angels of darkness wearing robes of light, so as more easily to torment, deceive and betray us, each OUE filled with subtle poison. 45. Wherewith to disease our bodies, and each one bearing a differently compounded otoplasm of damnation, in the shape of philosophical theories, wherewith to draw out the last drop of generous feeling and respect to God, or love for man. All this has been done as doing, from the first man to Job, Job to the man at the tomb, to the Magdalene, and so on down all the ages till today. Is it undeveloped good? It's utterly impossible for me to believe that evil is, as many so-called spiritual philosophers assert, a merely nominal, outside, phenomenal or surface thing, or that all, or even more than 1/4 part of the communicating intelligences are really the returned souls of the dear departed ones they frequently claim to be. We must be quite, indeed, far more careful of our spiritual associates, than we usually are of our EARTHLY ones. The time has come when thousands of us WBA believe in immortality, should evince a little more coolness in the matter of spiritual investigation. I trust the day has forever gone by when we will accept the ipse dixit of an invisible, but almost necessarily apocryphal spirit, merely because the gentleman or lady is not encumbered with 100 pounds avoirdupois of flesh and blood. Surely we are endowed with co 11110 and sense, we exercise it in other matters, why not then on this most vital and interesting of all subjects? Beyond all question, we are, on all sides, surrounded by myriads of beings, to us invisible. A great many people contend that all these, are decent, harmless, sweet, white-robed angels from celestial realms, but it is my candid, deliberate opinion, based on an experience of 10 years, under all conditions and circumstances, with hundreds of mediums, besides myself, of several nations, colors, and proficiencies, on both sides of the Atlantic, and, setting aside the demon theory altogether, that a great deal more than 1/2 of the communicating spirits are, to quote a recent author, regular scalawags, rapscallions. 4 and Democrat, huge paws, supernal pickpockets, spiritual plug. Uglies the canile, scrapings, refuse, the very orla of the real kingdoms, whose moral state corresponds to, but is infinitely lower than that of the same general classes here below. A good man gets soiled in bad company here on earth, but the damage is supremely greater to him who blindly associates with all sorts of spirits. Whosoever does so associate with spirits, whose only passport to our affections and confidence, consists in their ability to manifest, and talk to highfalutin, is on the high road to a slavery far more fearful than even southern bondage is to the poor black victims of its dreadful sway, and God knows that is almost past endural, ce. At this point I beg leave to recur again to the most infamous dogma that ever emanated from fool, madman, or devil. That the doctrine alluded to, that of the non-immortality of a large proportion of human beings, is the direct baby of hell, the complete child of the fiends. I have not the slightest doubt. It was not enough for them to sanction a miserable fallacy, that of the absolute freedom of the affections, but the evil ones know that wretched sophism is rapidly exploding, disintegrating, falling to pieces, by reason of its own inherent rottenness. Come to the rescue of their forlorn hope, and set a heavy premium on sin, under the specious plea, that the true motto for the majority is to eat, drink and be merry, for tomorrow, we die and there an everlasting end. Conscience under T's infernal belief, becomes worthless as a corrector of human conduct. Remorse is illness / nothing more. It says to the people of the world, go ahead, I do just as you please, rob, lie, steal, murder, do what you will, for if you are cunning enough to evade the land laws, you're all right, for at death you'll sleep well, and never waken. My reasons for regarding this pernicious doctrine as the sapient fruit of the individual sovereignty, and passional attraction tree, are these, in this fast age the weakest pointoi. 41. Human nature, at least in civilized natio bs, lies I11 the region of the affections and the passions, especially the amati. Men and women, strong as adamant, firm as a rock, in all other respects, are vulnerable and weak on the points indicated. The brief limits allotted to this pamphlet will not permit me to present the causes of this. Suffice it that ill fact is real, and not only is it universally conceded, but the daily press abounds with corroborative testimony. Generals who attack a fort, do so at the most pregnable points. So with a certain class of spirits. They enjoy forbid-den things, through mortal proxies is by sympathy. A spirit, was on earth a drunkard, he can't gratify himself in the spear.j world, but, if he can get coatral of be a medium, and can induce b to imbibe, he, can partake sympathetically of the exhilaration. As it is with stimulants, so it is with amativeness, only that 10 persons can be made to err in the last direction, where not over 2 could be in the former, for the reason that has already been stated. Evil spirits are more easily pleased through the latter channel than any other. Enemy H to spiritualism charge, and indeed not a few of its well-tried friends admit, that, to a certain extent, it ha point been productive of a great deal of mischief and the line of infractions of the seventh commandment in desertions, divorces and affinitizing. I neither affirm nor deny these charges, yet I do assert that they never sprung from normal, healthy, religious spiritualism, and d. Never can. All adulteries, desertions, and that have occurred, are from obsessions of foul fiends. By cultivating a trust in God and a firm faith in His protecting arm, we may smile blandly at all evil machinations, and grow strong where we are weak, day by day. At first the evil ones rode a high horse, and succeeded in victimizing many a good-meaning man and woman, who, ua-and-ltl.er the baleful gloss of a false philosophy, imagined free love to be really good.ntrue. But by and by, people began. F8. Ask themselves, 11 is this right? Will there not come a di of reckoning here ftcr, and just as they reach this point of the awakening and the unveiling, along comes the fiend again, saying, number 1 for only certain persons are immortal, everyone can therefore sin in this direction, as much as they choose, for the chances are 10 to 1 in favor of an eternal sleep. Therefore do wrong, and fear not I. Let this dogma of the pit once become popular, and the peace of society is sapped at its very iota, the brothel will become an institution, and but let us drop a veil of and gt the fearful tableau. The worst of the thing is, that unless a person be ever on the watch, he or she, being a susceptible subject, and having once been impregnated with the Ladian aura, is ever liable to fresh attacks, and so gently, so silently, mote sweetly, will the unseen ones throw their veil over the moral sight, that ere the victim is aware, he or she will find themselves standing look deep in the swamps of perdition, while all around them fl.it spectral harpies, laughing ha, ha, ho, ho. Where are you? Now my beauty, I conscious of this evil, it is solely to obviate it that I enter the arena as the champion of common sense, against what in my soul I believe to be the most tremendous enemy of God, morals, and religion, that ever found foothold on the earth, the most sednive, hence mt dangerous, form of sensualism that ever cursed a nation, age, or people, that is to say, against that system of philosophy which inculcates affinityism, and its child, annihilation, that sort of pseudo-spiritualism that digs the wells of Kiantone, tells woman she owes no allegiance to husband or society, tells man that his qualms of conscience, when he contemplates running off from the mother of his child with some highfalutin affinity, are on, why morbid notions, and urges him to go ahead in search of heaven in a wanton's arms, and blinds him till he falls so low that only God himself can extricate him. I think it is not difficult to discern it. 4. 1. Dawn and sunrise, the certain foreshadowing a bridal and better state of things, destined to grow and supersede all spiritual fanaticism. The smallpox, contagious as it is, does not possess one halt of the elements of infection that this morbid state into which the victims of the unseen vampires fall. Approach mediums, and in 2 minutes you can tell whether they be under the influence of good or evil spirits. Sit by them and touch the hand, if you feel an unusual coolness, blandness of sphere, gentle, wakeful sensation, the indications are good. If on the contrary, you feel a positive glow, an unusual warmth, a soft, seductive, somnolent influence, a tendency to sadness, to love, to endearment, then look out and run out, for the evil is at work. You must fly, else the morbid gas or effluvium will periat and taint you, you will carry the poison to others, and so the pestilence will spread. A deal might here be written regarding circles, normal and unhealthy, but Spee forbids all save one Mark, when at circles, forbear to touch hands, for if there be present one single victim of diabolic influence, his or her sphere is literally charged with lust, with immoral scorpions, with disease and intellectual death, serpents, and all unseemly, foul, and venomous things and correspondences, and you may be impregnated, lost, ruined, utterly destroyed. I how resume the subject of non-immortality. This doctrine I have heard on several occasions attributed to A.J. Davis, who is reported to have stated as the result of a clear-seeing investigation of the matter one that only a certain proportion of human beings had immortal souls, and that in Buffalo, NY, he had beheld 700 persons who death would forever cease to be. Since that time, other pretended harmonia, philosophers have made the same discovery, and not a few spirits have, through mediums, declared it. Having already spoken my sentiments of these last, I shall turn the attention of the reader to the former, Mr. A. Jackson Davis. And first, this 750. Extraordinary Tran has unquestionably performed a remarkable work in the world of letters. Many and many an infidel has he converted to a nobler belief. I regard him as the bridge over which thousands have passed to a better clime, and a higher region of soul and thought. The writer of this has shared his hospitality, as a thinker almost worshipped, and as a man ever and always esteemed him. So far then, all is as it should be, but as a philosopher he is no longer regarded in the light of authority. His theories were rejected on the following grounds. I know that no man had, up to 185, written so clearly on the subject of the soul's immortality as had Mr. Davis, in his masterly and supremely interesting letters to Furley of St. Louis. It is not too much to say, that hundreds of thousands drank in the spirit of those magnificent letters, us the thirsty Arab in the desert, drinks in the draught that gives him a new hold on life, and sends the grateful blood all bounding through his happy veins. So did the author of these incorrect pages. But when it was publicly stated that Davis had announced the Buffalo doctrine of non-immortality, when this terrible sophism ran the length and breadth of the latitude, when I publicly charged it on him in my Clinton Hall speech, which ran through all the editions of the New York Tribune, circulating 500,000 copies, read by thrice that number, and copied by 1 in 6 of all the papers of the United States, repeat, when he allowed this charge to go uncontradicted and unforeplaned, during long years, I, and thousands considered the report as true, he became the legitimate father of this immoral bantling. My soul stood aghast, it became horrified, arrayed itself against this infamous dogma, opposed its march with tongue and pen, still retains its inextinguishable hostility thereto, and, God helping, will do so till the death. How could any man place confidence in the teachings of a philosopher who eats his own words, contradicts his own axioms, first places L1 human beings, OJJ upon the deck of the 51. Ark of safety, the proud and gaily sailing bark or immortality, sets the sails, lulls us all into a sweet sense of serenity, and then just as we think we discern the rising banks of land, the spheres of that blessed home, coolly springs a trap, lets the bottom of the ship fall out, drops us midst the roaring waves of doubt, leaves us to sink beneath the rushing beamos of despair's black, Hadean gulf, and then more coolly bids us swim, those who can may reach the shores of supermortal being. Those who cannot, your father, or moth are, Esther or brother of, heaven's L must drown forever, drown in the underscore waters of forgetfulness, the sea of blackest night, the billows of great go.di utter a, fni, a 1l.a.tion. Woman or man, who reads these lines, let me tell you that my soul, clings to the hope of an existence beyond the grave, stronger than does the drowning wretch to the plank thrown out to save him. What do we behold of man aud his experience? Why, that I the serenest joy underscore this life can afford, still leaves an ineffable longing, still some taste, some pleasure of being looms up before it in another state of existence, nor do I believe that the eternal God implanted these deathless aspirations within us, without providing for their complete satisfaction, when we shall be safely ferried over the river. No, no. No immortalists sell your dogmas re2 devoid of reasonableness, and seasonableness to be tn by sensible people, even with 1,000,000 grains of allowance. The experience of the last 10 years is quite enough to disp, over a searchio us. We feel, we hope, we know that. Ne'er seen by mortal eyes, L here's a realm in endless light that lies more fair than loved Italian skies, where changeless summer forever beams, and a fount of joy forever streams, and music dwells in the very ALR, and the spirit of love is everywhere. The tiny feet shall bleed no money, for soft are the paths of that blessed shore J. 52. And tile heavy crosses left, bell meld, and amaranth wreathel the temples bind, and he who the weariest path hath trod, shall nearest stand to the throne of God. Oh, ye vain babblers against immortality, you may talk and harangue as you will, while merely guessing out a great folly. Don't forget that. We not that the bower are green and fair, in the light of that summer shore, and we know that the friends we have lost are there, they are air, they are there, aud we weep no more. The defenders of this absurd doctrine appear to reason all together in a very vicious circle, and involve themselves in difficulties at every step. Their difficulty seems to be a lack of power to conceive of anything outside of the domain of matter and mind, substance and spirit. There is such an existence. It is the empire of monads. A watch, a house, or a coach is a monad, while yet a mere incarnate thought. These monads exist divinely. We may call them ideas. We merely clothe monads in material garb to render them visible. God is the great monad. Men are lesser ones, which ever existed, ever will. Man being a mental monad, resembling God the greater, is necessarily an immortal being. Nothing can touch him destroyingly. He must finally ride triumphantly over death, hell, and the grave, whether he wats to or not. If any man is an immortal being, he must have derived the quality from those who begot him. If some men and women are not immortal, how can they produce an immortal infant? No woman can give to her child that which she does not herself possess. We create bodies, but souls never. God fashions the monad, and sends it down. Whenever a proper physical nucleus exists, a monad is attracted, and the mass of flesh henceforth envelopes a jiving soul. This is a splendid theme, my soul aches to deliver its thoughts upon it, but time will not permit. When, ever called on, I shall be happy to demonstrate how and why. All meu, rich, poor, black, white, all our underscore immortal nature reveals it, all good spirits declare it, God proclaims, a.bd common.sense sustains it. The fearful Hadean gulf of which we hav.e so often read and heard, is quite bad enough, but this sleep that never knows awaking is too ineffably horrible, too ghastly, too supremely terrible to be true. As for me, I had rather take my chance of escape from a doom to the infernal pit than to be altogether snuffed out, and I won't be, of that. God assures us all ETHCL by the harmonia.I or any other philosophy. If it be true th.at this doctrine originated with the great Poughkeepsie C.R., I can but account for it on the ground that he must have felt billions, spent a bad night, arose rather blue in spirits, and under this influence of ill humor, said the teabing as a jest, for I believe him to be too good a man to have said it in right DWN earnest. The man's mind is too clear, his motives too humane, nor can I for an instant think he really believes it. So supremely agonizing have been my sufferings, arising from the fulmination of this pestilent thing, that their bare remembrance makes me shudder. As with this humble writ.er, so with hundredi, nay, thousand data in the land. This notion of annihilation is the last offspring of the evil one, if evil one there be. At all events it is the pet hobby of all the anti-Bible, anti-Christian, anti-Evdotarithingdioan spirits. It is repugnant to reason, to common se, lse, lays the axe at the very root of civilization and morality, libels the Creator, ignores everything pure and holy, fosters iniquity, demonism, lust, hatred, wrong of all sorts, puts virtue at a discount, vice at a premium, and in short is utterly false, no matter who affirms the contrary. Why shrinks the soul back on herself? And startle us at destruction p. 'Tis the divinity that 11 tears with, and us, 'tis heaven itself that points out in hereafter, and intimates eternity to man. 54. Believe not, 0 my brother, and my sister, that at death yo 11 run even the slightest risk of being forever blotted out, for when nature ceases, thou shalt still remain. Nor second chaos bound thy endless reign. Fate's tyrant laws thy happier lot shall brave. Baffle destruction and elude the grave. The stars shall fade away, the sun himself grow dim with age, and nature sink in years. But thou shalt flourish in immortal youth, unheard amid the rush of warring elements, the wreck of matter and the cruelty of worlds. Be true to God, to yourself, to all true human duty. Watch carefully the communicating spirits to see if they be of God or of the night, yield not up the will, nor submit to be robbed of consciousness or magnetism, by any spirit, cultivate a healthy, normal, wakeful inspiration, suffer no spirit to throw a veil over your soul, your morals, or your consciousness, for if you do, you may be led to commit error, seemingly of your own free will, but in reality as Thinkins, is proxy of some designing knave without a body of flesh and blood, who lures yon only to gloat over and laugh at your missteps, perhaps at your fall. Remember the Woodstock tragedy as told by E.V. Wilson, wherein a man did murder under the unquestionable influence of bad spirits, a murder for which he suffered on the gallows tree. There are good spirits, doubtless, if you associate with any, choose these, for they double your and teach you well and do you good. Test them with a pure heart and earnest desire, and then God will surround you with a sphere that only pure and God-sent spirits can penetrate. A clean heart and a firm, honest purpose, is an impregnable barrier to the incursions of evil from any source. Watch and pray. Thus shall moral strength accrue, your feet will indeed be set upon the rock of ages. Fear herself shall stand aghast. And death, an idler, snore and slumber on our Othello HK, his occupation gone. LV. I. 55. LT is a plain maxim of common sense, not to tamper with infection, and he is a fool who, for the mere sake of proving his boldness and freedom for bigotry, rushes uncalled into the miasmatic influence of false teaching. Take heed, said Inor and aid wisdom, what ye hear the caution which is good for yourself is good for your children and dependents. A little mineral admixture in their daily bread, a little morbific quality in their daily milk, would be justly dreaded as tending to wear away their heel yet scores of unrighteous spirits, merely because they are spirits, are allowed to enter our dwellings, manifest at our circles, control and influence our mediums, tilling little by little, false, latitudinarian, ultra-liberal opinions, sentiments and doctrines, which, apparently all right and innocuous at first, yet spread out and intensify into the most horrible moral fevers. Freedom is a good thing, so said the spirits, so said we, but just look at the end of the sermon P1 each from that beautiful text. I look at the disorder and leprosy it shed abroad in the world. I so also with other con 1 and gly. Devised glosses of wrongdoing. There is a class of piratical spirits who should be kept as far off as you would a cobra or a rattlesnake, so also are their doctrines corresponding. It is as certain of the mind as of the body, that whatever is taken into it should tend directly to its growth and strength, all that is otherwise is noxious. Nutrition, moreover, is a gradual process, the result of repeated acts. If then, the Mirdan character are to make progress and acquire firmness, there must be not slight and occasional, but regular and extensive study of God and GTS revealed will. I feel that it would be ungenerous, were I to pass by the fact that A. J. Davis plumply, flatly, unreservedly denies that he ever affirmed the non-immortality of any portion of the human race. Doubtless his word is to be regarded a statophanioed over. 56. Tnan should be who claim to be candid. To Enra Thfs Denfaf would have sounded better had it come some year or two ago. But better late than never, and so I give it as cut from his own paper. If I have ever done him wrong, I regret it, but most as 811 L. Edley all that I have ever said against Davis' system of philosophy was founded on the uncontradicted statement attributed to him. I present his denial in his own words. In my next pamphlet I shall print the report of his lecture if it can be had for love or money, audi ad partem, being my motto, and the duty of every honorable man. But though Davis now ignores the falsehood and should therefore be honorably acquitted, all the charges made in this pamphlet stand good against other advocates of the snuffing out doctrine. Indeed hereafter they will be known as muff.outers. But the article Non-Immortality in Buffalo. INQ Uflo ER, New York. It is reported that in one of UT lectures in the city of Buffalo, you said that TT.air were 700 non-immortal persons residing there. If this is so, how can you prove it? This candid inquirer is entitled to our cordial gratitude. LJN, like clergymen and other sinners, becomes right straight via U.S. mail to us and puts the question in an honest manner. and does not ask this prejudiced next-door neighbor what we said in Buffalo. We cordially thank you, brother, and hope your noble example will not be unfruitful. While delivering a course of lectures in Buffalo, in the of 58, we introduced a philosophical supposition, designed to illustrate the number of anti-human or non-immortal types, see 5th volume Harmonia, which existed in the earliest stages of humanity. We enforced the thought, or rather brought it home, by applying the proportions to the Earth's present inhabitants. With few exceptions, are crowned with the glory. F. 51. An honor of immortal life, but the daily papers soon represented us as propagating the theory that only a small portion of the population of Buffalo was entitled to the priceless boon of eternal existence. The numbers were variously stated, some, that only one soul in 1,000 would exist after death, others, that there were just 700 immortals in all that beautiful city. With these editorial or repertorial statements we have no controversy. They are simply and heartlessly false. We are willing and able to stand by what we have written in any published volume, bearing our name, and upon propositions and philosophies therein presented. We invite unlimited discussion. What we know and what we believe on this head one may be found in the Thinker. In regard to Buffalo we remark that many of its citizens are our personal friends, most highly valued, but why so many of them should be labeled non-immortal, surpasses our present understanding. Will the Express, Advertiser, or Republished furnish an explanation? After Ali, a head's no bad thing, nor the brains within it, and the legitimate use of these things is to entertain common sense. Nor can we watch too carefully and earnestly the drift of the teachings of philosophers or the spirits, no matter how high-sounding their titles or pretensions. We cannot be too cautious about T4E trance. It should seldom be entered. It is unquestionably true that the trance, whether mesmeric, spiritual, or inducted by drugs, will to a certain extent educate the person subject to them. To be thus subject, under good and holy influences, once in a while, will probably do no harm, but to follow _w it up do y after day, is simply folly. Extraordinary results occasionally arise from trance. The serenest and most beatific vision that I ever experienced, resulted from taking 18 grains of Daum Mesk, an Egyptian preparation. I first took it in France, and subsequently ob. 8. 58. Tained the secret of its composition as it is made in Cairo. It may astonish those who knew me some years ago as a blank atheist, and believer in the accursed individual sovereignty sof lstry, when I tell them, that when in the deepest gloom of soul after trying to believe in Jehovah, with only partial success, I was at last perfectly convinced through the agency of this wonderful conserve. I took a portion of Daum Mesk, it perfectly illuminated me, but the lucidity infinitely exceeded anything that I had ever known before, either spiritual, self-induced, or mesmeric. In this illumination there was no loss of will or self. When fully clear, I asked the question, is there a God? The answer came, or one went to it, but the mysteries revealed to my astonished soul on that eventful night, will never be disclosed to mortal ears. One thing only shall be said, namely Neo. No, not JOI and IMT and LTZFLT have I since doubted the existence of God. Twice more, and only twice has this great experiment been repeated, not with reference to the same, but to other important subjects. Those who would know more on this point, may write me. In conclusion, WT me say that I regard spiritualism, taken as a whole, in the light of a herald and outrider, and avant cum of a better day coming. The conviction is irresistible, that a general revolution impends over the world. We see its signs in Millerism, Bratchurchism, political revivals, everything, and spiritualism is the St. John in the wilderness, proclaiming the advent of God only, in his inscrutable wisdom knows what, but that it is to be a bettering of the world, we devoutly believe. All the amazing breakings up and down of systems hoary with age, which for 20 years the world has witnessed, but indicates the light before the dawn. In politics it tells us of eoming honesty, in religion, it points to substance and reality as suppo reading hollow mockery and pretense, in philosophy it points to oohmo sense as asserting its supremacy over metaphysical moonshine, and transcendental twaddle. It points with unerring finger to the downfall of imposture, and the enthronement of the goon. It has struck the knell of all sorts of wrong, and proposes to inaugurate a better, purer, cleaner church and state, and spiritualism is one of the agents to effect these slow but certain changes. That the final conflict between good and evil is yet to be fought, and that when it does come, God himself will this time triumph, there can be but little doubt, nor can I help believing that spiritualism, with all its facts and fallacies, its truths and errors, its certainties and its fantasies, its lights and shades, will yet prove to be the Brahminical egg, from which shall yet go forth the full-fledged of Ek, to be, the glad tidings of great joy to every race of men, that it is yet to bear the olive branch, wherewith to crown the nations and the ages. I believe all this, and also that spiritualism has in it the elements of more power both for good and ill, than anything yet born of all the dead years, but, as already observed, the evil must eventually be overcome of right, and be triumphantly vanquished by the good. By and by the people will wake up from their lethargic slumbers, and go to work with a will to build up the true temple of worship. The churches will come to spiritualism, purge it of its devils, and borrow fires from its purest altars, and spiritualism will go to the churches, purge them of the hypocrisy, bigotry, and folly, and borrow its devotion, its pathos, and its power. Normal inspiration will replace abnormal trance speaking, we shall have less philosophy and more common sense, ascertain less about the spheres, and more about ourselves, less concerning the Milky Way and more about the milk of human kindness, less about the concentric rings of blazing suns, and more about the simple bonds of brotherhood, and finally, WNLTT. 80. Shall hear less concerning human destiny, and more about honest, manly, human duty. This radiant change is coming. A.I. Ready the wide world heaves with the throes of a now nativity, and the signs of the times indicate that the magi of the nations will once more worship at the cradle of the Redeemer, once more do homage to the crucified Jesus, not the sacrifice of Calvary, in flesh and blood, but the great Christ come again, but this time to the great universal human heart, not to the men of Judea alone. Fearlessly the truth is probing S/Adam 1, Ebu rendered grey J bland hypocrisy disrobing rearing falsehoods mail away. To attain this good, this great, this glorious result, let us all hope and pray and work. F.B. Randolph. J. Appendix. That others may be benefited by my experience, the folly go wanting pages have been written, and that they, and all the world may be further benefited, I proceed to make public several of the medicinal secrets, by means of which, as a curer of dis-ease I have, past years, been so successful. No one with fair powers of observation and reflection, but must be convinced that the enormous amount of disease, the terrible drain of human life, the fearful harvests death continually reaps in our land, the innumerable consumptions, dyspepsias, and complaints which are peculiar to the female SEI, only, indeed the NT catalogue now so prevalent, mil STL and GTE constitutional hereditary from parent to child, in the form of taint and humor. It is well known that ordinary medicines will not drive these humors out. For 7 years I studied hard, with all the powers at my command, to find what at last was obtained. My discoveries are woe_RTH millions of dollars, some of them I retain, others I give freely to the world. I kept them all till experiment, conducted on both sides of the Atlantic, fully proved their value. To the end of demonstrating this fact, I spent thousands of dollars, and bled all over this country and Europe, experimenting as I W13NT along, and that too, with success that satisfied my S.Oct.Lt.T. 82. It had found out the grandest medical secret of the age, or at least one of them. The diseases 10 most prevalent today are cancer, scrofula, lung complaints, nervous, liver, and stomach affections, dyspepsia, RHETTSS. And especially most painful and exhaustive diseases of the reproductive systems of either sex, embracing ovarian and other tumors, urethral, vaginal prostatic, and other, still more fearful ulcerations, all springing from one end source, and one end LTMLY, a deterioration of the higher fluids, and chronic disturbance of the dynamic 4.es of the human body. I claim the power to cure these diseases, and to iterate the normal action of these physical forces by means of the following foreign herbs, or where these cannot be had, their American-grown substitutes. First, the neem or margassa tree bark, botanically, Aratorachna indica, a tree of the order Melaceae. Substitute American frostwort, Cistus canadensis, 2d. Cacpanic root. Substitute, Culver's root, Leptandria virginia. 3d. The orchilla weed of the Cape of Good of Hope. Substitute, peony flowers. 4th, Babura or green heart tree seeds. Substitute, larkspur seed. 5th, imported India hemp cap dash. Suels, or young leaves. Substitute, violet oenker weed Viola rostrata. 6th, flowers of the English daisy plant. Substitute, marsh wiljow ahar cole. The substitutes can never be fully equal to the others, yet with either I will undertake to cure any curable disease, and will guarantee success in 85 out of every 100 cases. They have cured the members of my family, and raised me from what all believed to be my dying bed, when all else had utterly failed, and with a skillful combination of the A.Han, I have cured hundreds, and still am. T/3. Doing so. An A.1 article, and the best, for which there is no substitute, and which I hail as the greatest remedial agent in the world, is that which is known as Egyptian Daomi Mskh. The article has several uses, but its greatest and best is as an ingredient of a medicine of unparalleled efficacy. In what cases, will be stated when I present the formulas. The secret cost me too much money to permit me to give it away, yet I am willing to impart it for a fair remuneration. People now are old at 50 years, instead of 100 as in the old end times, and the general average of life is 35 years, instead of 70, as it normally ought to be. That this state of things is the legitimate consequence of human folly, on the part of the people or their progenitors, there cannot be a rational doubt, and whatever will tend directly to repair these ravages, must prove an unqualified blessing. This thing I believe I have. As early as 1852, while studying and practicing medicine, I became satisfied that much more light was needed to render the divine art what it 11 Hal 4b. I saw the absence, and felt the great need of what subsequently was discovered, viz., positive medical agents, totally free from mineral or other deleterious SNB stances, agents that would act not merely chemically, but dynamically and directly upon the disease itself in its very strongholds. I tried all those systems, and rejected all but the antiseptic theory of cure. While in England I became acquainted with Dr. Evans, the greatest physician of that school in all Europe. By him I was put in possession of his great secret, and found that while his principal agent of cure, acacia charcoal, was well adapted to the cure of disease in that humid climate, it was not suited to the finer and more nervous, high-strung people of my own country. It was a good biliary-corrective, and absorbent, but did not possess other indispensable qualities. Therefore, while traveling through Europe, I cast about me, for a wood that would yield a coal as soft as the acacias, and as fine as that from the willows. At la.st I found 84. This, and D now have the best article ever yet produced. I now proceed to give the formulas, every one of which has cost me hundreds of dollars to perfect. No 1 1 ounce each of the herbs named, or their substitutes, and macerate for 8 days in warm water. Then pour this water in a close vessel to keep. Take the herbs and pound them well, then slowly stir them up in hot warm water and strain. Mix the two waters together, and evaporate in a flat dish beneath the stove, till only 1/8 the quantity remains. Bottle it, add 1 pint Madeira wine, 10 grains or iron phosphate, and 2 ounces loaf sugar. 2 teaspoonfuls of this, taken night and morning, will cause scrofula, tumors, and diseases of the liver to fly like fog before the morning bla.st, and utterly rout any cancerous taint, and cure the worst syphilis that ever poisoned human blood, or doomed innocent children to premature graves, under the mild names of scrofula and saltrum. It past proved itself. The name of this preparation is UDL or cord lal. Precisely the same ingredients, with 3 times the amount. BF iron, and 1/4 of an ounce of down mesk, together with 1 ounce of Jamaica ginger, constitutes the celebrated Life WNet, which is formula no. It is a delicious invigorating cordial of astonishing power as a permanent tonic and strengthener. It is an absolute and perfect remedy for lucre.ie in the female, and its dreadful counterpart sperma.torpound, in the male. I know that some people will blame me for thus alluding to the victims of folly, carelessness, ignorance, or ungodly debauchery, but all objections must stand aside before the potent fact that these terrible ailments are as widespread as civilization. A remedy for the fearful thing is needed, and in thus giving to the world freely, what has cost me years of toil, I feel, not only that I am doing a GMDS.CT, but also putting a stop to much of the imposition practiced on the suffering and unwary, by unprincipled dabblers in medicine. The formula above given is a sure thing, and through bug hit ds who are driven to suicidal despair may be rescued from one premature graves. No 3 This formula is a great one. The medicine is beyond ill question the best remedy ever yet discovered. Fob. N well settled C.A.Noerot1s humor, M. Scrofula, venereal taint, iatitary or not. Fuck. LJVEBBCSE.ASE. Affections of the glands. Stomach, kidneys, bowels. BL.AtterJ_.ND nerves. No matter how sick add. Take a fine GEFer, or flour chotco.lo. Salix 3 ounces, powdered cornstarch 2 ounces, conservo. Guava or of roses, 2 ounces, loaf sugar 1 ounce, phosphate of iron, 1/4 of an ounce, Dowam mesk 1 ounce. Mix int.o. 2 fine paste, RDL 1 out, AB.D cut cakes therefrom with a thimble. One of which is a dose, to be taken night and morning. The effect is magical. With this alone I have cured hundreds, and do it in persons abandoned as incurable. No 4-0 harcol or salix 1 part, pearl barley ground, 1 part. Taken mornings fasting, and at night take a lemonade, very sour. And the limbs being bathed daily with acidula. Ted water, will. Our 95 in 100 KAOT. 9. 66. Rheumatism, gout, neuralgia. And 8.11 The watery diseases. These formulas, I maintain, constitute a medicinal battery, against which no disease can stand. They are perfect specifics for the diseases named, while those ESPCI indicated are the only things I ever saw that would positively and unmistakably cure all diseases of the reproductile system, in the female, from a suspension of the menses, to the most inveterate prolapsus, scrofula or syphilitis taint, and in the male, from most simple derangement, to the most fearful spermatorrhea and impotence. The secret of the immense success of these specifics, and the growing demand for them, consists in the fact that they are compounded without the aid of chemicals or direct heat, alcohol or pressure, and consequently alt. Their eleotrio and magnetic life is retained and condensed, to be given up to the human fluids, which they quicken, enebgize, vitalize, and invigorate, i.e., they thus furnish an ethereal fluid, which instantly assimilates with those of the body, rendering them and it positive to disease. Indeed they are the only known agents. One each attack the vest directly in its strongholds, and cure, not by mere medication, but by force of their own dynamic power. We thus lay claim to the discovery of the only true method of curing disease. There is no guesswork or perhaps about emitter. We know what will cure and what won't. I have satisfied myself that no one article of the materia medica is more worthy of regard than CNGTR.JNDA.LBLMCP. An extract of which I imported and keep on hand. 48 grain. 67. Thereof, mixed with 100 of sugar of milk, divided into 128 equal parts, one to be taken every 6 hours, will cure the most inveterate stricture, piles, prostatic and female difficulty. I have made arrangements with an importer to furnish me the very best oriental hemp, upon whose genuineness my correspondents may place implicit reliance. Persons who use this herb in medicated baths, as a poultice, or in any way, should beware of the miserable trash usually sold under its name. Above all, should they avoid the so-called extra TS. The medicinal properties of this remarkable plant aeroalgae solidly destroyed by heat and alcohol. They are literally worthless, for they are all prepared by heat. Procure the French or Egyptian extracts. I am the only person in this country possessed of the Egyptian formula for the extraction of the medicinal properties of this plant, and I will impart it to those who want it, if paid for my time in writing it out. While investigating, and searching for a cure for the diseases named above, I also searched for their causes, and the means of their prevention. I found both, and also made what I believe to be the most important discovery of the last 25 years, in a physiological point of view. I have caused this to be printed in a form compact and simple. No man, no woman, whether married, or single, young or old, who values health, strength, beauty, and long life, should be without that, which, from its peculiar nature, and inestimable value, is called the Grand Secret. Here let it be distinctly and forever understood, that the formation all DED2, and constituting it, is of a high, a noble, pure, and philanthropic, as well as a medicinal and physiological character. It is sacred, and will yet save millions from misery, early death, and ruin. There is nothing morbid about it, nor is it intended to gratify, but it is intended to cure those who are. Why? Because it is the keystone of the arch of 68. Health, soil, moral, mental, and physical, and from its 1-2D, naught but manly, womanly, holy, and serene purity, good, and excellence can come. Its cost is $1, and 3 red stamps, a trifle, while the SEC rots disclosed are well worth thous. Ends to any senreal bumble being, and to SJJCH only will it, knowingly, be sent. DB.OB Bebgius. The craving for getting liquids is a disease, as well as a vice, indeed more often the former than the latter. I calf cure the habit. Utterly extirpate a.nd remove the taste and desire for all alcoholic stim.pl.ats, and also the love of to be.a.000. By means per FECTLY harmless. The price of the article used is 82 and 8s a bottle. The formula for Mockapagit is for sale, with the right to vend. There is no stake about the efficacy of this excellent compound of Si please. Victims of these pestilent LJABITS can now reg 1J.I and their liberty without suffering. I desire the patronage of all who are sick, and want to get well. As a physician, I have won the confidence of the people by fair and honest dealing, and fulfilling my duties to those who J and place the LLSLNS under my directio. My cons 11 LTB1G fee IA. TET.05, for which I return medicine to THNT amount, with full directions and advice. I procure articles in my line, on commission. Trusses, Zbolder BROE, Do NB Bells, Supporters, NC. PB Randolph, Boston, Mass. Mary Jane Randolph is an Indian woman, descended from a long line of native medicine men, and is thoroughly educated in her profession, the human system in health and disease, having been her unremitting study for years, beside which, bar power of magnetic diagramnosis is fully equal to that of any woman in this country. Her success in the treatment and cure of TJ.11 diseases peculiar to her eeks and to children, has been, and still is such, that she points to it with feelings of honest pride, especially in reference to cancer, dyspepsia, leukorrhea, falling off WOMT, suppressed menses, ulcerated vagina, intestines, and stomach. Subotio.effect.ions, even to leprosy. Hashtag ill crooked spine and general weakness, nervousness, mores, and scrofula in any of its forms, even to the most fearful epilitio taint. To which, alas, many an honest woman is victim and a sufferer, from the wickedness of their husbands. This is an unwelcome truth, but truth it is, nevertheless. Out of 256 cases of supposed leukorrhea treated during the last year, 71 were clear cases of this fearful malady, in 4 different forms. Larry Jane Randolph has her own medical secret, which, combined with the innumerable preparations named in the foregoing pages, enables her to completely master the above diseases. Without the use of poisons of any kind, but by means of natural simples, applied after common sense methods, ladies writing her, must clearly indicate their symptoms. They can, and should express themselves freely, telling the whole story, no matter how painful, resting sur THT no eye but hers will ever see their letters. In her they will find, not only a careful advisor and physician, but a confidential friend. To W11.om they may freely disclose their sorrows, in the certainty of finding relief, whether the patient be married or single. All questions may be asked her, and truthful, honorable, human answers will be returned. No woman, or married man who respects his wife, and there are, thank God, a few such, should be without the little brochure, mentioned in this pamphlet, under the name of the Grand Secret. To the wise it is indeed priceless. All letters of consultation should contain 3 stamps and a fee of $2 to 5, for which that amount of medicine will be sent by express. If her consultation only, the fee is $2. Her facilities for the manufacture of her remedies, all of which are prepared without heat, are not excelled. Adra, L.S. Mary J. Randolph. Indian Dotress. Boston, Mass. This has been a production by the Mental Chemist, for study and education. Copyright 2024.